Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. So today's guest is a registered dietitian. She's currently involved in research in dietetics and the bio-psycho-social spiritual model of health. She's also a trustee at UK's PHC, the Public Health Collaboration. She's an advocate of the low carbohydrate way of eating. Ellen Calteau, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
Thank you, Nayiri. Thank you for having me.
Ellen, you were morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
Then you lost a significant amount of weight, and you were able to maintain that weight loss for 12 years now, I believe. So take us to the very beginnings. When did you start putting on weight, and what do you think the triggers were?
Okay, it's a great question. So when I was first born in the early 80s, I had lots of allergies, and my parents really struggled to feed me. So I was brought up for the first 7 or so years on a real foods diet, actually. So everything I ate had one ingredient. It was a carrot, it was a potato, it was a piece of meat. So there was nothing else that was pre-packaged that I would be able to eat. Because back then, vegetable oils could have any kind of nuts in or any kinds of seeds. They weren't just a sunflower oil or a rapeseed oil. So it was safer for my parents, who were very young when they had me, just to cook from scratch. So everything was cooked from scratch. But by the time I was about 7, the food industry started to change, especially with allergies, and then we started having things like just rapeseed oil and just sunflower oil, and that opened up a whole new world of food for me that I hadn't been able to have before. So up until then, I was a very healthy weight. Got pictures looking quite slender. You could see ribs. I was quite fit. And then suddenly all of that changes as I'm now able to eat a lot more that's just off the shelf. And my weight quickly came on, very, very quickly came on. I think a lot of that has to do with the genetics as well. My dad was obese, and my sister was obese as a baby. She had no allergies or anything like that. So from then, my doctors, that they were concerned I was so young and so overweight, and they put the whole family on a low-fat diet. Which I loved, because I could have all the pasta I wanted and all the rice and all the bread I wanted. So it was great. I would have that. I would have the yogurts, the low-fat yogurts, with the sugary middle, all of this sort of stuff. And we'd go back and see the healthcare professionals, and you'd get the impression that each time the scales were going up and up and up, it was our fault. I must be cheating somewhere. I must be getting hold of some food. I was less than, I was about 10. So, but I must have been getting hold of some food, but my weight was going up and up and up. But my parents were doing exactly as they were told, and it was low fat everything.
Yeah, that's so similar to Dr. Tro's story, personal story. I've invited him on this channel. We did talk about obesity and, and who's to blame. And he shared something very, very similar, that the blame was on the patient. And now he's an MD. He says the blame is purely on the healthcare system. And that's it. This isn't the patient's. The patient isn't to blame. So for my audience, I'll put that link below so you can check out that video too. Ellen, what drove you to study dietetics?
Well, it was after my weight loss journey. I
Oh,
started studying dietetics. So after I'd lost the weight, and I went to my GP to show him that, look, this can be done and it can be done with food. Because at that point, my BMI went up to 55, which is almost fast track for bariatric surgery. And that was the route that the professionals were looking at. And I'd managed to lose the weight myself over 2 years. So I went to my GP and said, let's start a support group in the surgery and let's help the other people around this local area to help them lose weight. And he explained that he could only take advice from dietitians. So I went back and got my GCSEs, my A levels, and then went to university. So that's why I became a dietitian. Thank you, GP. We now have things called expert patients and groups like that now. So maybe it'd been different if I'd lost the weight a bit later down the line. But I'm really glad that that's the way it went. So I've learned a lot more since.
Yeah, two questions came to my mind, but let's start with with your studies. So when you were studying to become a dietitian, did you actually cover the low carbohydrate diet?
It was
Or
fairly
was it
taboo.
all based on low fat, which you personally would have known back then that it didn't work for you?
Yeah, it was all fairly taboo. We couldn't really talk about it that much, especially in weight loss or even diabetes, although things have started to change now, which I'm so glad. But yes, so for 4 years when we were talking about low fat diets, and I was sitting there with my whole milk and my cheese and my non-trimmed meat. But yeah, that's how it was. That's what it was like then. And yeah, it was a bit conflicting because I knew it wouldn't work for me, but it wasn't where the evidence was when I studied.
Did you ever challenge?
Not so much. No, I didn't. No, I wasn't brave enough then.
It must have been tough to just sit through sort of teachings that aren't based on science or evidence.
Well, it was based on the evidence at the time.
At the time.
Yeah, so they could really teach what was there then. But it wasn't a reflection of my experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how did you discover the low carbohydrate diet? What year was it?
What year?
Yeah.
I probably first discovered it would be 2003. So just to backtrack a little, Nayiri, so I gained about a stone each year throughout my school years. It was quite depressing. I couldn't really keep up with sports. My dad would have to make my school uniform because I couldn't get a uniform to fit. It was quite low at that point, quite dark. And then of course I hit my 20s. And the doctors at that point, they started sending me to commercial weight loss groups. And at that point, I realized I wasn't quite like everybody else when it came to food. So one of the commercial weight loss groups had suggested on certain days of eating in a certain plan, you could cook the chips the way they suggested, which was like parboiling, then spraying them with like a light oil, and cook them in the oven, and you can have as much as you like. That's absolutely fine. But I would go back and have about 3 baking trays worth, and then next week go back, pay my £5 to find out that I'd gained more weight, and completely baffled because you said I could have as much as I like. So I think at that point I started to realize I wasn't quite the same when it came to the amounts of foods that I could eat. I carried on gaining weight. And then in my early 20s, about 20 years old, I'd learned about the low carb diet, and I started it. It was Atkins. I lost about 6 stone, and I felt great. I felt absolutely great. I mean, who wouldn't feel great on bacon? It was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. But then I started to phase off, started to reintroduce carbohydrates. And as soon as I reintroduced refined carbohydrates, that was it. All bets were off, and I regained the 6 stone plus more. And couldn't get back onto the Atkins after that. I really struggled to get back on. There was a piece of the puzzle that was missing for me. Why it was that I couldn't just have one biscuit. You know, the healthcare professionals would say, you know, just have one. Don't feel deprived. You know, you're at a birthday party. It's okay. Don't feel left out. I really struggled with just the one or the two. So that was the piece of the puzzle that was missing for me.
Yeah, so that's the moderation that
Yeah, moderation.
moderate your food intake. I mean, so why couldn't you moderate your food intake? And you're not the only one, as you and I know, you're not the only one.
No, definitely not the only one. Though at the time I thought I was. The way my head seemed to feel with food, whilst I was still bigger as well, is I'd wake up in the morning and before my eyes were open, I'd think of breakfast. And as I was mindlessly eating breakfast, I'd be thinking, oh, I can have this for lunch, or it could be the day that was the day that I would go to diet or whatever. So it'd be eating breakfast almost in a panic of got to get this done and then make it till lunch and try not to have anything in between. It was just all food obsessed. And I went to work the one morning, and I worked in an office predominantly with females. And I asked them all, what was the first thing they thought of before they woke up? And I got several answers. Oh, I've got to get the kids up, or I've got to go to work, or, oh, you know, it's not Friday, or all of this stuff. And nobody said food. And it's interesting you saying like, I'm not alone, because at that point I thought, I am never mentioning to anybody how I think about food, because I'm clearly the only person in the world. So I carried that for many years afterwards. Of the way I thought about food, obsessed about not eating, obsessed about what I'm going to get next. I thought I was the only one. But the piece that was missing, the reason why I struggled to moderate, is due to food addiction. And it's food addiction that kept me there. It was that have just the one, it won't hurt. You won't feel so left out then. That would tip me over the edge to have more, although I'd eat quite sensibly in front of you and maybe even choose a salad off the menu. I'd get a kebab on the way home, but because I just couldn't manage, and it was that constant that cycle obsessing about food. Once I'd learned about food addiction, and somebody just mentioned to me, maybe just don't have that one, just don't have any. It was frightening, but actually it was also quite freeing. I think I'd always known that I couldn't have one. But when professionals tell you that it's okay to, you go ahead and do it. But when someone said, just don't have the one, just don't start, just like an alcoholic doesn't have the one beer, or the one whiskey, maybe you should just not start. And that's what I did. I learned more about food addiction, figured out what the foods were that were triggering this cascade of eating. No surprise, they're all ultra processed. That I was able to bring back the Atkins, the low carb diet, with success. And I lost 11 stone and I've maintained that 11 stone weight loss for over 12 years now. And it's the maintenance is the best part, really, because it's really quite rare that you can maintain for such a long time as well.
So I think the key to your success was recognizing the core problem that you had, which was food addiction. You know, in this space, I meet a lot of people, and I've covered food addictions with specialists, and also I've covered some success stories with food addicts. And every single sort of conversation has reinforced the idea in me that the first step is to actually acknowledge that there is an addiction there. So what would you say to people who are more cautious about using the word addiction? And, they say, well, we don't want to categorize people as addicts if they don't have a healthy relationship with food, which does make sense. However, I mean, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I don't have food addictions, luckily, or not yet. But as a type 1 diabetic, I acknowledge my condition. I am fully aware of it. And I don't have any sort of any concerns about describing myself as a type 1 diabetic. I am a type 1 diabetic, and this is what I do to manage my blood sugars. But where do you stand with that? I mean, you can't acknowledge that there is a problem unless you label it properly. What do you think? Where would you stand with that?
Well, I'm quite comfortable using the word food addiction, compulsive overeater, food addict, things like that. I'm quite comfortable using those terms. When I'm in clinical practice, I use whatever terms the patient may use themselves. If they say, "Oh, I'm not a food addict, but maybe I'm more of a harmful user," then we will go with that, and we will just meet them where they are. That's the best way to do it. I found anyhow. When you come to work with somebody individually, that I know we like to label things, but just let them label it how they want to, however it is that they want to, and just work with that. So if somebody's not comfortable using the word addict, then don't use it. I think we're probably going to treat it along the same lines anyhow. By cutting out ultra processed foods, we're going to have the same treatment. And if they're comfortable using a different term, then I would use whatever term they like to use.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think that's a good way to go about it. Ellen, so what were some of the first interventions? Obviously, you cut out the ultra processed foods, right? No cookies, no biscuits, no sort of ready-made meals. Okay, so Ellen, what were some of the first interventions that you employed, obviously, when you started the low carbohydrate or lower carbohydrate diet?
So one of the techniques that I used was with a group of other food addicts who supported me, especially at the beginnings when you put down the amount of ultra processed food that I was eating. You start getting like withdrawal symptoms. And one of the first things I knew that had to be put down, the sheer volumes of it I was eating, was chocolate. And I remember the night that I stopped eating chocolate because I went to bed. I knew it was never going to happen again. And I sobbed my heart out. I sobbed myself hoarse. I remember just feeling so awful that it was very clear that I thought that I was going to die if I didn't eat chocolate. I was just going to die. But then the next morning, after an awful night's sleep, I woke up and the first thought was, actually, you're going to die if you carry on eating chocolate. I haven't eaten chocolate since. It's been 14 years. Haven't had any since. But one of the techniques that I used to get through that, because there was still this desire to have to go through this process, is I'd buy the chocolate, and it was always big chocolates. That was never going to cut it. It had to be big. It had to be two. I'd buy the chocolate, and I'd walk outside and I'd put it in the bin, and I'd do that for a few days, and then the next time I would do it, I would take it off the shelf, and then I'd go to the cashier with all my other groceries. I'd go to the cashier and say, I've changed my mind on this now. Can you put it back for me? And they never say, are you sure? They just take it and it goes. And I just used to watch it go. It's gone. Okay, I've done it. I'd walk out of the shop and I would call my other food addict friends and go, okay, I've managed to do this. I've got to this stage. I'd do that a few times. And then the next would be about getting it closer to where you get it off the shelf. So I would take the chocolate bar off aisle 2 and leave it on aisle 12. And it's not today, that process, not today. And then eventually I'd be able to get to the chocolate and go, not today, maybe tomorrow, but not today. Get my other groceries and walk off and go. And I won't say it never bothered me since. There was times where I just couldn't go down that aisle at the very beginning in early recovery, just avoided that aisle. But over time, it's about as desirable as pet food. I can walk down that aisle and I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered. Over the years, there's been times that's been cues and triggers. For example, when people use a spray with vanilla in it, it makes me go like that. Oh, so you got those kind of cues. But that hasn't happened for a while. And during that whole process, I kid you not, I would dream about chocolate. I would dream about eating chocolate and wake up feeling guilty. Oh no, I've done it. I've eaten chocolate, and then share with my other friends who understand, who are also food addicted, and then we'd all have a good giggle about it because it was just a dream. It was okay, but that's how much it was imprinted on me to have that. So that was one of the techniques. And actually, that's a couple of techniques in one there, because one of the main techniques that I found that have been so helpful to me is having a network of other food addicts to be able to go speak to. There's no point me saying to my husband, I need to go for a walk because the food in the fridge is calling me and it's so loud that I can't concentrate on work. I'm distracted by you, that by the noise of it, that I'm now irritated with you and I'm snappy. He's not going to understand that. But having a network of people who feel the same, I can pick up the phone pretty much day or night and say, look, I'm having this at the moment. This is what's happening. Can we talk about it? Within 15 minutes, it's all gone. So that is really important, to have that group of like-minded people who really understand, not going to be judgmental. You can all have a giggle about it toward the end, and that feeling passes.
Yeah, we've covered the importance of support network here with respect to, particularly with respect to any dietary change, actually, but particularly when it comes to addictions. May I ask, Ellen, where, I mean, you're based in the UK, where did you find that support network? What organ, where did you go?
So I was actually in Spain at the time. I was living abroad. And there was a group of people there who also had food addiction. They'd put in the newspaper, do you have a problem with food? Contact us. And it was just a group of people. I'll send you the details and you can pop them in the bit that you do. And I would go to them, and we would keep in touch through Skype, as it was, and things like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so now chocolate was out of the way.
Yeah,
What
and then
else
gradually, so after that, it was chewy sweets. So chalky sweets, yeah, I could take or leave. Chewy sweets, the gelatin type ones. I really struggled with those. So they were very much next to go. Biscuits, crisper came later on. Sometimes if I'm in a good space, crisps are not too bad, but I tend not to go there now. But they weren't so compulsive, and they didn't always talk to me. But it's interesting how when somebody opens a wrapper, I'm like, oh, I can hear it, and that's it. I lose my train of thought. Even now, which is I find it amusing now. I do find it amusing. So the weight came off very fast because it just goes to show the type of rubbish I was eating. And then at some point, I also at that point went to 3 meals a day, so there was no snacking in between. And from somebody that would have one meal a day that started at 8 in the morning and finished at 10 at night, that was hard. That was hard to go to 3 meals a day. And I was very fortunate at the time because my job was early in the morning and late in the evening. So I had the day free. And most of the time at very early recovery, I slept in between my meals because I was clock watching. I was clock watching. So the agreement was lunch was at 12. It was not cooked or prepared before 12. The cooking and the preparing starts at 12. So there was a process to it. There's a discipline. So there was a fair few hours in between where I was pacing the floor. Um, I was going through all the thoughts of, okay, maybe it'll be okay to just have it a little bit earlier, or if I just have half of my lunch now and have the other half later, and that constant chatter, then I'd go to bed. I'd just go to bed and I would sleep. And do the same for lunch. That didn't last very long, but I was very grateful that I had that flexibility to be able to do that. Eventually, the chatter started to die down, and before I knew it, between meals, I was doing something creative, or I was doing some cleaning or some things. Because when you're lost in addiction, there's a lot of self-neglect. I was able to pick that back up, so I could paint my nails, or I could tidy up my room, things like that, and start looking after myself in between meals. So that was really helpful, as a way to get discipline, but also the weight started to come off. At this point, we never talked about portion sizes. This is very gradual, very gradual. We never talked about portion sizes. So people I was with, you can have, as long as they're your non-addictive foods, which you pre-agree with the people that you're working with, or somebody who understands, have what you like. And I did, and I still lost weight. And I kid you not, that my plates were big. My plates were big because it had to see me through to lunch. That was my thinking. And I would have very huge portions at that time. And I still lost weight. Then at some point, my weight started to plateau. By then, my thinking was a lot clearer. I was a lot calmer. I wasn't so impulsive with other things in my life. Everything was a lot calmer. I was already fairly low carb at this point, as well. But then my weight loss started to plateau and I was still overweight. So at this point, it was about getting honest with myself and looking at those food portion sizes. And we'd got some dietary guidance who suggested so many ounces of meat and things like that, or ounces of potato or vegetables. And I do remember weighing out pork chop to what it said I should have compared to what I'd have put on my plate. And I remember thinking, what do I do with the other side of my mouth? This is so small. But it was the honesty check that I needed. And I was thinking, how am I going to manage on this? And I did. I managed absolutely fine, and I'd have those portions, and then my portions became a lot more normal as what the size that I did need, and the weight loss then continued again. So that was very interesting as a technique, but that was over the 2 years that it took to lose the weight.
So now 12 years on, are you where you wanted to be?
What, weight-wise?
Weight-wise.
It's not out of my hands. It's none of my business, my weight. I don't, scales are also very, very scary to get on the scales. We have a bad history, so I don't go there. I go by my clothes. My clothes fit. I get my summer clothes out every year, they fit. I get my winter clothes out every year, they fit. So far, I may be changing soon as I get older. Who knows what my body will do at that point? We'll address it then. But the scales are none of my business. What I do know is I'm still classed as overweight.
Right.
And if any healthcare professional says to me I'm overweight, like, well, my body's happy where it is.
So what do you eat currently? So you're still, I presume you're still doing low carb.
Yeah, I still do low carb.
So
Yeah.
what would a typical day involve for you? What kind of foods?
Meats, cheese, chicken, vegetables. At the moment, the garden's flourishing, so we get a lot of garden vegetables, which is nice. Um, I put cream in my coffee, double cream in my coffee. That's nice. Um, I have fruit when it's in season. So at the moment, the berries are in the garden, so I will have those. And in a couple of months, the apples will be ready. I don't typically have fruit the rest of the year. It's I don't I It wasn't an addiction thing. Although grapes and banana I could probably go over the top with. But it was more of in the supermarkets. I noticed this last year. In the supermarkets, the fruit is incredibly sweet, whereas the apples, for example, off my tree, they're not. I don't know what that was, and I would find myself with a bag of apples from the supermarket, and I'd have two or three a day. But I'd find myself in my garden and take an apple from a tree and not be bothered the rest of the day. So maybe there's slight addiction there going. Um, Preoccupation with food, maybe. But yeah, so for the rest of the year, it tastes overly sweet. I don't know if that's the way they store them, the way they're grown. I'm not sure, but they definitely don't taste like they do from the garden.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I've been an avid gardener for years, and I have my, I just, I'd have apples from my own garden, and they wouldn't taste like the supermarket bought ones. They're probably genetically modified to taste sweeter, to contain more sugar, be it fructose or glucose. Um,
Mm.
it's interesting because my daughter recently said, "Don't buy these peppers, the salad peppers again, because they taste of." She said they taste of perfume,
Oh, wow.
which is interesting. She's got a very
Oh.
sharp sense of smell, which is really interesting because obviously she's never tasted perfume, but it smelled that. She imagined
Mm.
that it was so perfumey. Interesting, right? So I've stopped buying peppers, those sweet red peppers. So let's talk about social interactions. How do you deal with them? Because that's the time when most people report back to me, at least some of my clients, saying, "Okay, I had a relapse. I just fell off the wagon."
Yeah.
How do you deal? How do you
How
address?
I deal with them now is very different to how I dealt with them first in recovery. So first in recovery, there was just some places I just didn't go to anymore, and some people that I stopped going out with. That was for my own protection. I didn't feel stable enough to be able to go into those environments and not end up eating all the garlic bread or the onion rings or whatever it is that was there at the time. So um, I almost isolated for a bit until I was a bit more stable, a bit more stronger, a bit more courage to say, no, I won't be having that. And also practicing the word no as well, because it was such a lie. When people would say to me, do I want a biscuit? And I would say no. In my head, I know I was lying. I didn't want a biscuit. I wanted them all, but I would say no. And it was helpful in those social interactions to practice the word no, almost make myself believe it, fake it till you make it. So there was a lot of occasions I missed out on at the very beginning, and I consider I was healing at that point. And if from any other disease that you have, you may need to not go to different places because you are healing, a broken leg or what have you. So uh, I was healing at that point. Then later on, with the groups of other food addicts, my family is all quite addicted. And if we went out um, for a meal, it would be a buffet. They they would always choose a place that has a buffet. That was always a little bit of a dangerous territory for me. But over the years, as I got a bit stronger, what I would do is we'd pull up in the car park. My husband and daughter would go in, and I'd make a call to somebody else who feels exactly the same about food, a fellow food addict, and I would say, okay, this is what I plan to eat when I'm here. This is what my plate will look like, and I'm handing that over to you now. And I'm going to go in, and I will not be going to the desserts. I will not be going to all the carby section. I will only stick to 2 plates, and that's it, and that sort of thing. And I'd go and have a great time. But it's that reporting to, and that is there's a word for it, accountability.
Accountability.
That's the one. Accountability. That and having that mindset before I walk into the restaurants, and I'm bombarded by all the beautiful smells, the sounds of cutlery and packaging, all the sights of food, all of that, before all of that can get in and then make me go, sod it, I'll just have it all. I've already got that mindset focus to walk in and go, okay, I know what I'm having. I need no more. As for now, well, I keep really good company, actually. I seem to go out with lots of low carbers, so I keep really good company at the minute. The people I do go out with, they know now. They know Ellen's going to be the most awkward person ordering on the menu. So when something like steak comes with chips and onion rings and what have you, I will go and say, can I have the steak? And I don't want the chips or the onion rings. Can I have extra salad? And if you've got some packets of butter, I'd like that too. So I'm the most awkward one there, but they know, and they know I'm going to do that. So it's all well. It's all well.
And did you ever experience any sort of pressure from family members or people close to you saying, oh, just one won't hurt, just have one, or just this is a special birthday? So
yeah. Yes, most definitely. So my mum was guilty of that, especially in the early days. So like I said, I lived in Spain, and I would come home every term, and they would see I've lost more weight, and it's quite a shock for them, because on Skype you only see that, don't you? So when I would come home, a few stones lighter, few stones lighter. I think my mum struggled with that. And it would be a case of for Sunday dinner, I would say, Mum, can I have the lamb and vegetables? That's all I'd like. And it would always come with lamb, vegetables, with the potatoes, the roast and the mash, and gravy. And I would say, but Mum, I really can't have this. And we have this phrase, once it's on the plate, it's too late. And a few times it was like that. I just go, okay, forget it. It's not worth the argument. I'll just eat it. And I'd eat the potatoes. Which it wasn't too bad, but it wasn't helping me on my weight loss journey at that point. And I'd have to sit down with Mum and go, Mum, you really can't put this on my plate anymore, because I've really struggled to say no. So please don't put it on my plate. But she was struggling at the same time. But she was like, Ellen, your plate looks so empty. I thought, put more veg on, put some more meat on. Oh, I don't know about this. What about gravy? Can you have some gravy? I'd rather not have gravy on this occasion. You've got any olive oil? Put a bit of olive oil on it, or some butter. But she was struggling. So she was going through a process as well. Parents are there to nurture and feed their children. And for something that she's always known, meat, veg, potato, to then go down to meat, veg, and you see plate. It was hard for her. It was hard for her, but we grew together, and now she fully accepts it. She fully accepts it now.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that everyone now knows Ellen is going to be the awkward one, and they accommodate, because I feel like that too, both as a type 1 and a low carber, so which kind of go hand in hand, to be honest. So so type 1 management and low carbohydrate diet kind of are the same thing in a way, but yes, I know how it feels like to always be the awkward one.
Yeah, I'm always the one, because I have to check all the allergens, and then go, by the way, I also don't want these carbs. But they've been brilliant. I tend to go back to the restaurants that were really good. I just go back to the same ones over and over again, and that comes back from allergies. So if I'd go to a place where there's been a cross-contamination, there's almost walking past the restaurant makes me feel sick because I think, oh, we're going to go through all that again. So I never go back. And if I've had a good experience in a restaurant when it comes to allergies, then yeah, I tend to always go back to those or that chain.
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't usually eat out, but when I do eat out, I go to the same places where they've always been accommodating and happy to substitute without extra charge. To be honest, if you're substituting potatoes with more green beans, for example, I mean, cost-wise, it's not like we're asking them to substitute the Yorkshire puddings and the potatoes with additional steak, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't
absolutely.
make much difference to them. But when they've been really kind and accommodating, then I like going back to the same place.
Absolutely. And it feels safe as well. You're not going to end up being ill. So, which is really nice. So one thing that I'm going to trial very soon. So recently we stopped all the sweeteners. So I was on sweeteners for quite some time, but recently we've stopped all the artificial sweeteners. My daughter as well, she doesn't have them. But I do miss I miss the idea as my daughter grows up going for a fancy drink. At the moment, if I go to a restaurant, even if it's at 8 o'clock at night, I order a hot water and slices of lemon. They've usually got the bar open. They can get some hot water. They're fine. I've never had anyone say, no, you can't. So I tend to have that with my meal. But me and my daughter went to the cinema the other day, and I really fancied the idea of going for a pretty, the pretty cocktail glasses. I was thinking, how can we do this so that we're not having loads of sugar, we're not having loads of fruit juices, we're not having artificial sweeteners. And I had this idea that we both just drink water. We're happy with water. She loves playing with ice. But I was thinking one of those margarita glasses with ice cubes in there, just a glass of water, really. And then them decorating with slices of limes and lemons and oranges just to make it look pretty. And I've been mulling that over. I'd even pay for like £1 or whatever for that, just to have that experience so we can chink together and and she can enjoy that too. So at some point I'm going to try that out and I'll let you know how I get on.
Yeah, I do things like that too. I mean, just sparkling water with some lime juice in it. It it even without any sweeteners, it already tastes sweet to me. I think there's
Yeah.
something mental going on in there.
I think once you've come away from the sweeteners and the sugars, even a carrot can taste sweet. You know, my daughter asked me if I put honey on the carrots. Why on earth would I put honey on the carrots? No, those are carrots, but they just taste incredibly sweet. But they never did whilst I was eating all the ultra processed food. They tasted awful. But now I can really taste food.
So are your family low carbing with you?
My daughter is real foods, so she will have brown rice, she'll have potatoes, um, sweet corn, peas, things like that. She'll have those, but she doesn't have ultra processed food, so doesn't have pasta. We don't get her breads. If she goes out, every now and again she'll try a bit of bread, and she ends up with a stomach ache because she's just not used to it. She's not used to it at all. She's found sourdough seems to agree with her a bit better, which makes sense. But it's not something that I would buy to keep in the house. So if she's out, then she can have it. My husband is low carb, and myself, yeah, and my dad now as well. So yeah, he's now he would be a good story for you. Maybe pass that on to you.
Sure. Doesn't it feel like like you've been the role model for them all and you've inspired them to follow your path?
Yeah, well, they all know how I've done it. It's hard though when they go to their healthcare professionals and we still hear the whole, but you'll have a heart attack. I'm thinking, well, with my dad's type 2 diabetes, he might be dead before that. I don't know, before that makes a difference. And which is sad because then my dad will manage his diabetes with low carb, but then not be honest with his healthcare professional. because he feels like he can't be honest. And that's a shame, that is, because that's another healthcare professional that we're not getting through to, that low carb can be really useful, especially useful for people with type 2 diabetes as a lifestyle alternative before we start medications.
And a great tool for type 1 diabetics to manage.
Of course.
To achieve normal glycemia. And I had to do it alone. So I know how painful it is, because without the support network, you don't always know what you're doing. So I did it very slowly. I started in 2015 and I did it very, very slowly. Insulin needs to be adjusted. I mean, I would have loved some support from my healthcare professional, but they were, dismissive. No, you need to eat carbs. Why?
Yeah.
And that's what I was told. And then I decided I'm not sharing anything with them. So, and they now know what I'm doing, and they just leave me to it. So,
yeah. Hopefully at some point my dad will have the courage to be able to tell them the truth, because at the moment they're just saying, wow, the insulin's working really well done, keep going. And that's confirming their belief, isn't it? So, but I can understand why he doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's one of the saddest parts, because when people find out about low carbohydrates or the way of eating, and they go, yeah, I can do this, and they see it all on social media, they read success stories, and then they go to their GP or even dietitian, and then they're told something completely different. So they're left confused, and I go, oh, maybe this isn't safe. Yeah, that's.
I mean, one of the main things they stop eating is ultra processed food. I mean, how can that be unsafe to stop eating ultra processed foods?
So as a dietitian, you're working full time as a dietitian, right?
I'm working with the Food Addiction Resources arm of the Public Health Collaboration. So we're helping to educate healthcare professionals on food addiction, and we're also helping individuals find recovery through a low carb, real foods approach. That's what we're doing, and help them understand food addiction. So I'm not in the mainstream in NHS at the moment.
But do you feel that there is more openness and acceptance of the low carbohydrate diet among medical professionals?
Yes, yeah, definitely, especially in the area that I used to working. So it seems like there's pockets of area that are opening up to this now. But here in Birmingham, which is where my dad's surgery is, it's still not accepted and not talked about. From what he tells me, I've not worked there. But in the areas around Birmingham, it seems like that's the advice they're giving out if the patient wants to try it. So, and of course, it's all got to be patient-led, hasn't it? But if a patient, wants to carry on eating ultra-processed foods and is happy to have an increase in medication, then we work to what they want. There's no point in trying to force anybody. But it is important that people have all the choices on the table, all the approaches that they can take, rather than saying this is the only way, and gradually increase insulin over the years to make it a chronic disease. And we now know it can be reversed and put into remission.
Ellen, a question about your allergies. You mentioned you suffered from a large number of allergies when you were younger. So have they improved on the low carbohydrate diet, free of ultra processed foods and vegetable oils?
Yeah. Not really. They're IgE mediated, so it's part of my immune system. So it's already been learned to be allergic to these, to be allergic to certain foods. I have heard, though, that people have managed to undo that. I haven't read the science behind it. I haven't learned how to do that. I'm under an immunologist at the moment who's going to take me through the egg ladder so that the reaction isn't so severe if there is cross-contamination. but she has said that it's not very successful with adults, but we can try. We can try. That's going to be very interesting. And this is a healthcare professional I think very highly of. So she knows my story. And the way to do the egg ladder is you bake a cake with sugar, butter, and flour, and then you put an egg in it, and you have very small amounts. And she went through that with me. And I wasn't worried about the egg at all, but I was saying, how can I adjust this? And she went, oh yeah, you won't eat wheat, will you? And you won't eat sugar, will you? Like, so far I've got an egg and butter. How can we adapt it? And she's been really good. She says, as long as you've got, she gave me the equations for it. As long as you can come up with something that has this egg in it, cut into so many pieces, it's been baked for so long, then you can put it in anything you want, which is really good, because I don't just have like, I don't want to eat sugar and flour, but I haven't had a cake or a cake substitute for over a decade. So I don't really want to be starting down that path again just to help with my allergies. So I hope that if I can come up with something, a recipe that works well, I can pass it on to her, because these egg ladders are given to children. So to help them with their allergies, we're asking them to eat cake. There has to be a better way to do it than making them eat ultra processed foods. But I can understand why the ultra processed food would be less of a risk than them continuing with the allergy. So, but if we can come up with a better recipe, I know I'd prefer it.
So obviously, so egg allergies, you're allergic to eggs, right?
And some nuts. Yeah.
Some nuts, but not dairy.
Well, I am, but I have a tolerance to dairy. So yeah, that was a surprise for me as well. It made sense for why I was so poorly as a child. But I have a tolerance. That's so if you imagine what I said about the egg ladder and then being a milk ladder, I had that as a child, because my parents didn't know. Ellen's just always sick. Couldn't figure out what it was. They knew milk was a problem when I was a baby, but just keep going, bit of yogurt here and there, bit of cheese. So I actually built a tolerance to it. So now if I go off dairy for a few weeks and then reintroduce it, I do notice I get bad stomach. So I keep it in my diet regularly, so we don't get a severe reaction.
Interesting. In small amounts, or
well, a piece of cheese, some cream in my coffee. But yeah, I can't have big amounts, because then I'll get a stomachache, because I'll have had too much and the gastro problems then. But it's not as bad as the egg. With the egg, I need an EpiPen, and certain nuts I need an EpiPen. It's because I was introduced so early.
Ellen, we're going to wrap this up shortly, but I mean, you're an expert in what goes on in the mind scientifically when someone is an impulsive eater or someone is a food addict. Can you go through that again? Because I loved your presentation at the Keto Festival.
Yes.
Met you in person in London recently. So I loved your presentation there. Can we just go through what goes on as far as the neurons and the neurotransmitters are concerned?
Yeah, we can do that. It's going to be interesting without my slides. There's two parts of the brain that's is involved with addiction. I'm sure there's many others, but the two we focus on is the prefrontal cortex, which is here, and then we've got the midbrain, which is right inside the ancient part of the brain. When we've got the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for rational decisions. It's you can reason with your prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for that. So when that is active, somebody can reason that they won't have that biscuit today because they've already had a piece of cake, and be able to walk away. Now, for that person, the non-addicted person, the midbrain's quite quiet. It's happy. It's been fed. It's been watered. It's not under threat. And these are the things that the midbrain, once it's satisfied that it's not under threat and it's been fed and watered, it stays quiet. Now, when somebody starts to become an addict, the ranking for the midbrain changes. So the drug of choice will take precedent over food and water. And we see this in alcoholism, where people will eventually drink themselves into malnutrition because that is more important, or drugs, that is more important than having food or drink. And that's what we see. Now, with the food addicted brain, it's ultra processed foods that seem to be becoming the drug of choice and taking precedence over food and drink. So if the midbrain is activated and on high alert because it hasn't had enough of what it feels enough to survive of the ultra processed food, the prefrontal cortex starts to shut down. So now we can't reason. So we can't reason our way out of the biscuit. And then we have the biscuit and the midbrain calms down, or we have a lot of biscuits, however it works, the midbrain starts to calm down and the prefrontal cortex comes back on. And then we reflect on our situation and we start feeling guilty. We start feeling the remorse, the panic will start, rearrange the biscuit tin, make sure nobody can tell that I've taken some, that sort of behavior. And that's how it works in the brain. And we build those pathways. And Dr. Nicole Labor of Ohio University and more recently Chris Van Tulloken, they've been talking about addiction for a long time, especially Nicole Labor. She explains it really well. And we've now seen the new book around Chris and processed people. He ate ultra processed food for a month and he actually changed the way his brain worked. And 6 months later, after stopping, those pathways were still there. So that's how it works. That's how it works in the brain. Which is why I bring into our support groups and our courses with the public health collaboration, is that it's not your fault. So for all those years that I thought it was me, I didn't have the willpower, I was a bad person, I'm just not strong enough, I'm not good enough, and all of this negative self-talk, never once did it occur to me that perhaps there was a problem with my brain at that point, that it was because of that I kept going back and kept going through those cycles. It wasn't my fault. And and this is what we try to explain to our patients as well, or our clients, that they're just rewired, just need to be rewired. And we can do that. We can do that slowly by building new pathways, by coming off the ultra processed food, quieting it, training that midbrain, if you like, to stop constantly pressuring you into having that cake or that chocolate or whatever.
Yeah, so you have to rewire your brain. It's not about willpower, but can you rewire your brain for good? Once it's rewired, do you ever fall back, or what's your experience?
My experience, well, after 14 years of being in recovery, I had some very sad news about a month ago. And it was very emotional news. I was very upset. It was lots of crying, screaming it all out, that sort of thing. And it went on for such a long time that I asked myself, what can I do to make this pain go away? And my brain said, cheese on toast. I haven't had cheese on toast for years. So do I think we can be rewired? I think we still have those pathways. It's there. I giggled at it. I was like, well, you know what? My brain is right. I will actually feel a lot better if I have that, but it would be so temporary. And so I picked up the phone and I called another food addict friend and I said, this is what I'm going through at the moment. My brain reckons cheese on toast will cure all. And it soon passed. So I think there are, from my experience, there are new pathways built, but the old ones are there. And it's recognizing as soon as the midbrain, I imagine, wants to go down that old pathway, saying, not today. It's going to be okay. Let's look at it another way, because we've been there before, and it ends up with me on the floor crying that I've eaten a whole loaf of bread again. And we don't need that, for 20 minutes peace. We don't need that. Let's look at it another way. That's my experience.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, Ellen. I can't thank you enough for your time today. So if someone wants to find out more about you or follow you or contact you, what's the best way to go about it?
The best way would be go to the Public Health Collaboration website and look for food addiction resources as one of our projects. We're actually going to take a new group from the 24th of July. And the groups are very small because things that people share are quite intimate. So we want people to feel comfortable. And then there is continued support afterwards as well. And of course, if you're a healthcare professional and you want to learn more, this month we will have our level 1 course available, which will be CPD accredited as well. And it's self-taught, so you will be able to go through that as well. And over time, we will get to level 3, which will be accredited to have a healthcare professional become a food addiction professional as well. So if anybody that wants to work in that area.
And for people seeking help or group therapy sessions, are they all online, and can anyone join even from outside the UK?
Absolutely. So it's English speaking. So anybody from any time zone is welcome to join. It's open to international food addicts. All welcome. You're all welcome to come and recover with us. Absolutely. At the moment, yes, to just English speaking. There are lots of Swedish groups available. I don't know of any other languages though, but for now.
I'll put all those details below so my audience can find out more about Ellen's work. Okay, well, thank you so much, Ellen, and you have a wonderful day in beautiful Coventry, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye for now.